Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here, episode 2528 of The Tom Woods Show. With our old friend Brion McClanahan. We have not, I think, had Brion on since I added a video component to The Tom Woods Show. So here's old Brion. I remember it's Brion with an O, so if you're looking for Brion McClanahan, don't forget that. Brion is a faculty member at libertyclassroom.com, and he is the author of quite a few books in American history. So The Founding Fathers Guide to the Constitution, The Politically Incorrect Guide to the Founding Fathers, the one about 9 presidents who screwed up America and 4 who tried to save her. Is that what it's called?
That's the title. Yes.
And then you have an anti-Hamilton book, How Alexander Hamilton Screwed Up America. So you can, as you can see, whatever the issue in American history is, Brion comes down on the correct side of it. So Brion, welcome.
Thanks for having me back on. Yes, first time appearing on your television show, basically. It's the Tom Woods television show now.
I had to be dragged kicking and screaming into the modern world. And as I keep whining to everybody, YouTube is still punishing me for it. I can't get traction on YouTube at all because I went for 9 years using their platform with no video. And they hate that. Oh, they want to punish you for that. And so I am being punished. So every time you watch on YouTube or you send it to your friend or whatever, you are defying the evil SOBs at YouTube. So I encourage people to do that. Anyway, let's talk about things going on these days in the news that pertain to American history. I mean, it really does show that there is a good answer when a student asks, when am I ever going to need this? Oh my gosh, kid, look, the people who rule over you are distorting U.S. history in their own interests all the time. And if you can't see through that, you're going to be enslaved all the faster. So it's really important that you understand this. So first of all, I would like to say something about what is it that Joe Biden is proposing to do with regard to the Supreme Court?
Are you asking me, or are you gonna present? Well,
I want you to explain it and then you to critique it. And while you're doing that, I'm going to grab a book off my shelf.
Sure. All right. So Joe Biden has done several things. First, he wants to have some type of ethics oversight of the federal courts, or at least the Supreme Court. You know, you have to disclose if you've received any cash contributions or if somebody took you on a trip or something like that. So we have to have an ethics review of the Supreme Court. We got to have term limits. We're going to put these people on notice. You're going to get off the court. And there was one more, and my memory is escaping me here. There was another proposal. Do you remember what it was? It was the two that stuck out were the term limits and the ethics, but there was something else.
The term limits is the only thing I remember.
Yeah, there was one other thing, and it's my memory is escaping me.
But it's not an expansion of the court per se.
No, he didn't want to expand the court. No, he's not going to pack the court. I think the way that it was going to work was that we were going to be able to appoint someone every 2 years to the bench, and then you had like an 18-year term or something like that. They're going to start eliminating people. So, 2 years in, we're going to get rid of one person on the court, which of course would have to be the conservative. We'd just go with like Clarence Thomas. Right? We'd start with Clarence Thomas, and then you'd replace him, and so that person would have an 18-year term, and you would just do it for 9 consecutive times, and at that point you would have a rotation of the court. So. But of course, he realizes that there would have to be some constitutional amendments working here, and Congress would have to do some things about this. He can't just do it unilaterally. So it's interesting how this would work. I don't know, and I'm going to talk about it this week on my show too. I don't know if it would be in line with maybe what the Anti-Federalists would have wanted. Remember, there was some critique about what the Anti-Federalists would have said about the court. They were concerned about the expansive power of the court. But the key to all of this, of course, is not necessarily federal power. It's always comes down to the states. That was the issue for everybody. Or is the court going to get involved and actually say that we can invalidate a state law? And so I know we're going to talk about that a little bit too, but the federal court was not a problem if it just did its job in looking at unconstitutional federal legislation. It always came down to the states. The issue for the left, though, is that the Supreme Court is now doing things that they don't like because their agenda had the entire time has been only possible because of the federal court. So this is why the Democrats are all upset about the Supreme Court at this point.
You know, when in the New Deal period, there was that proposal to pack the court, and it was initially done dishonestly. Oh, the court is overwhelmed and they're tired and they're old and we have to help them and all that. And nobody bought that. Then they finally just more or less were honest. Yeah, we have to get rid of people who are ruling as if we're still living in the horse and buggy days. I happen to like those horse and buggy days. They had better constitutional interpretation. But I have here, this is actually from my politically incorrect guide. I know you've done 2 books in the series, but this is from the Senate Judiciary Committee speaking about FDR's court packing plan. So as you know, as we've said here, we're not talking about court packing under Joe Biden, but we are nevertheless talking about a very significant change to the dynamics of the court. And so what's notable is that at that time, even a lot of Democrats were uncomfortable with what FDR proposed. And so we read from the Senate Judiciary Committee, we recommend the rejection of this bill as a needless, futile, and utterly dangerous abandonment of constitutional principle. Its practical operation would be to make the Constitution what the executive or legislative branches of the government choose to say it is, an interpretation to be changed with each change of administration. It is a measure which should be so emphatically rejected that its parallel will never again be presented to the free representatives of the free people of America. Well, can you imagine Democrats talking like that now? That's exactly what we want. We want that.
Yeah, of course. The other thing that it came to my mind what it was, they want to have the president where that his acts as president would not be outside of, they couldn't be exempt from oversight by a criminal or civil court, right? So the president wouldn't be immune. They're going after this whole idea that Trump is immune for acts done while president. That's not the issue. I mean, the problem is with all of this, right? So if Trump does commit acts that are in line with the Constitution while president, well, then of course you can't criminalize those. And if Trump committed murder while he was president, that's certainly not in the power of the president. If it's something he does, he goes out and kills somebody himself. We could get into the whole war power situation. I mean, does a president actually commit murder if he drone strikes an American citizen? But that's something else. So this stuff is just all kind of stupid when it comes down to it. And as you just read there, I mean, there were sane people at one time in America that thought, well, you can't have the court just be completely political at all times. And that would be the effect of the rotation, because what you would do is completely recognize, well, the court is political. If we don't have our left and right guys on there, they're going to rule the way we don't want to. And Samuel Alito has actually been interviewed recently. He said, be careful what you wish for here, because what we're trying to do is put the brakes on some of this unconstitutional stuff that's been done for years. And it doesn't matter if you're on the left or the right. You want that. You want an independent judiciary because it can help do things and put the brakes on things that are just out of control. If you just want to have a politicized court, you're just going to get, as you said, another extension of the executive or legislative branch. That's dangerous long term, and it's not something that we want to see.
All right, I wanted to get that out of the way, but I have some other things I want to talk to you about that you are one of the best people to talk to about. And this is going to take us back a little bit into the Republican convention. And there was an interesting passage in J.D. Vance's acceptance speech that probably would have gone over the heads of most people. They wouldn't even have really understood the significance of it. But it was not lost on some commentators, even like a neoliberal like James Lindsay, who's like conservative by 2024 standards, but he was hysterical about this. J.D. Vance said, American principles are great, and I have no quarrel with them. But there is more to being an American than simply allegiance to abstractions. America is a place. America is a home. America is a people. And this was like, he's a Nazi. because he thinks there's more. It's blood and soil. Because he's not just talking about abstract principles. But he's right. He was arguing people don't go to war to fight to defend abstract principles. They fight to defend their homes. They fight to defend the specific things that are dear to them and meaningful to them. And to see James Lindsay go absolutely berserk about this. So I tweeted on Twitter, and I've had Lindsay on. I've had nothing against him, but this was like, I said, a lot of these people who, quote, left the left, like Lindsay, they only partially left the left. I mean, if you're that hysterical about that obviously innocuous passage, then half your heart is still over there.
Well, I mean, look, it doesn't matter if you're on the left or the right. I would say probably 90% of America is over there. Because if you look at the West Coast Straussians or the neoconservatives, or you talk about neoliberals, whatever it is, they all believe in what's called the proposition nation myth. It goes back to Lincoln. Lincoln revolutionized the revolution in 1863 when he gave the Gettysburg Address. And he said, look, the United States was founded on this proposition that all men are created equal. And from that point forward, that became America. And so everybody believes it. Now, what happens is really interesting with this particular argument. The West Coast Straussians and the neoconservatives will say, well, look, this is true. And you know what? We took care of this by the civil rights movement. Civil rights movement alleviated the problems that we had. And if you look at Joe Biden's address that he gave after he was basically booted from power by the Obamas, and he says, you know what? There are some things, we have this proposition nation. We haven't always adhered to it, but we were striving to do it all the time. How is that substantially different from, say, I don't know, a West Coast Straussian that said, well, yeah, we made some mistakes, but we got there in the civil rights movement, and we could still do a little better on some things, but, we're there. This is why Joe Biden is the perfect guy for them. I mean, he really is. But when you have this position that the United States is a proposition, it's just a set of ideas, well, then where do you stop the revolution? This is why the left loves it, because you can say we've never met it. It's never been met. We got to keep the revolution going. The right will say, well, we stopped 1964 Civil Rights Act or whatever piece of legislation we stopped right there. But why do they get to decide where we stop? The left will never agree with that. So the minute you buy into the United States as a series of an idea or a series of principles or whatever it is, a city upon a hill, whatever the position you're going to take, you already lose. You've conceded the field to the left and it's over. You have to say the United States is something tangible, something real. As you're saying, it's a home, it's a people, it's a place. When you march off to war, when an American soldier goes off to war, I mean, even in the 1940s, we'll just go to World War II or Vietnam. In that case, they were fighting against communism, but a lot of these people were fighting for something real. Well, I'm fighting for my hometown and my state. I'm here to protect my state, my people from these communists and communist aggression. I'm here to protect this against the Japanese or the Germans or whatever it is. You would be hard-pressed to find too many Americans, I think, who are saying, I'm going off to war to go fight for the proposition that all men are created equal. Who does that? Nobody. But this is what they want you to believe. And if the government is that, I mean, if that's the core of America, then you can keep the revolution going in perpetuity. It never has to stop. And of course, the culture war, everything we talk about is just one big steamroller. We're all caught and smashed underneath it all the time.
Hey, everybody, this is not a sponsor message. I just wanted to let you know that my guest, Brion McClanahan, and I, along with our colleague Kevin Gutzman, whom you've also heard on the Tom Woods Show, teach American history. Let me tell you the advantages of our courses. Number one, they tell you the truth. Number two, which is closely related to number one, they are not enthralled to any kind of political correctness or wokery. Number three, they are taught by Brion, Kevin, and me, three people who don't hate your guts. And number four, you can get them for free. That's right. You can get our U.S. history courses, which are in-depth, which you can listen to anytime, anywhere, for free. Just go to woodshistory.com. That's woodshistory.com. So I want to go a little further into this. Now, I don't know, I'm not going to implicate you in something somebody else said, but we both know Tom Fleming, formerly of Chronicles magazine. Mm-hmm. And I remember distinctly, I don't know if he was in a debate or what it was, or just ordinary conversation, but somebody had said something like, well, this is a violation of the principles America was founded on. And Fleming said, America was not founded on principles. Now, that will come as a shock to people. He said, this country was not founded on principles. But I think people would say, well, what about the Declaration of Independence? Doesn't that lay out the principles of America? So what's the proper way to contextualize the Declaration?
Okay, well, I mean, you could say that there are some principles in the Declaration, the most important being the last paragraph of the Declaration, which would be that we have these free and independent states, that we're breaking away from the British Empire, and we're now interested in self-determination and self-government. Those are principles. to say that but what he was getting at is some abstraction, as we just talked about, right? All men are created equal, or life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or these kind of things, which we know that language did find its way into various founding documents, state constitutions, Bill of Rights. I mean, that stuff was there. But if you were to ask these men, to a man for the most part, they would say, well, look, I mean, what we're looking at here, what we're trying to do is protect the foundations of government that we've known and loved our whole lives, which goes back to the Magna Carta, of course, the English Bill of Rights, these kind of things, what they called their ancient constitutions, is self-determination. It's local government. It's the ability to govern ourselves and not be under the arbitrary power of some entity that we have no control over. That's what they were more concerned about than anything else. Even if you read that second paragraph of the Declaration, Jefferson gets into this. He says, look, when a government becomes abusive of these ends, right, it's the right of the people to alter or abolish the government, right? So it comes down to self-determination. That's what they're interested in. Now, I do think that you can say that the Declaration is an important document, but only if you look at it within the context that is being written. And if you compare it to the English Bill of Rights, it's very similar in that it's an indictment of the king. The king has caused all these problems. The Parliament's been complicit. Therefore, we have to break free of this government. We are exercising our right to self-determination, and that's what we're going to do. And so that line about all men are created equal, Jefferson said at one point, well, this is just the expression of the American mind. It really didn't mean a whole lot. I mean, we've taken this now out of context and run with it. But we know, as Barry Shane has written in an excellent book on this topic, and people weren't really committed to that at all. If you look at the state constitutions, the actions of the founding generation, they weren't committed to this all men are created equal thing. That was just something that came later as people started reflecting on this and saying, well, this works for us politically, and so let's run with it. And I think that's important to get out of all this. If I can mention that we've done something with this at the Abbeville Institute, it's called the 1607 Project, Virginia First. There's a great YouTube video on that, free of charge. We've got a book on this, Virginia First is the title. We get into all this stuff, and Barry Shane's actually part of that, where we talk about how America is not founded on an idea. It's founded on real things. This Anglo-American political and legal tradition. This stuff matters. More than just this abstract expression of equality or all men are created equal, whatever you want to say. It's not that. It's something else. And that's what people were fighting for in 1776 or 1780 as they marched off to war against the British. It wasn't for this belief that, everybody's equal on this continent, because they certainly didn't believe that at the time.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I neglected to respond, and I'm going to respond to somebody from the 1607 Project who wrote to me to talk about this. So I'm going to get back to him, because that is an important thing, and I do want to talk about it. Obviously, naming it the 1607 Project is intended as a play on the well-known book and project known as the 1619 Project. Now, can I presume, and I apologize for not knowing for certain, but I feel 99.9% certain that there has been some Brion McClanahan work done on the 1619 Project. Am I correct?
I've talked about it, not necessarily directly, because, look, I will say this about the 1619 Project. In one way, Nicole Hannah-Jones, she gets some things right. When she is critical of the founding generation and say, we have this idea that all men are created equal and they didn't believe it, she's correct. She's not incorrect about this. And in fact, the 1619 Project and, say, the 1776 Commission, which the Trump administration created, which got me in a whole lot of hot water with Michael Anton and the West Coast Straussians when I criticized it, it's two sides of the same coin, because they both believe in the proposition nation. It's just that Nicole Hannah-Jones, as I said, believes the revolution is ongoing. We got to keep going with this. And she was confused. If you read her essay in the initial project, and when she put this out in the New York Times magazine, she said she couldn't believe I guess it was her father, would fly the U.S. flag. Well, how does that happen? He said, because I believe that all men are created equal. I believe in this proposition. He believed in the proposition nation. It was somehow possible. She never did. But the West Coast Straussian would say it's already, we've had it. We've got it. So that's the real debate between those two, is they're debating the same coin. We're having a whole nother argument and a whole nother field and a whole nother ball game. which is why we wanted to do it. It's because it's essential to have these two different narratives. If we're all just looking at this in the same way, then we're always going to get to the left. If we come up with a different way to look at America, as J.D. Vance articulated in that speech, it's going to throw a lot of people off. I mean, it's really going to tick some people off. But when you do it, you actually create a new narrative about what America is. And look, it doesn't mean that you're saying only people that are, of Anglo descent can live in America. That's what Michael Anton got off. Of course not. It doesn't mean that at all. I mean, look, if you're born here and your family's been here, naturalized citizens here for generations, this is your home too, and you're part of that tradition as well. So it doesn't mean that just because you're not Anglo descent, you can't be part of this. It's something else entirely. You still are thinking about these things that make America great, which is this Anglo-American legal tradition that we've all inherited and that we all enjoy. And these are the things that Americans really do think about when they say, well, we like self-government, we like self-determination, we like these things. That comes from that. The rule of law, the way we look at it, it wouldn't be there without the British.
Let me ask you about maybe something we've not talked about in the past, but in teaching in the classroom, what would you say? I mean, I almost hate to ask about the state of historical knowledge among young people, but and it's not entirely their fault. But I don't want to say, like, what do they misunderstand? I want to know, is there any resistance that you meet to trying to make particular points? What is it the toughest to get them to understand?
Well, it's gotten harder in the modern age. I've been in the classroom now for over 20 years. And say in the last 5 years, maybe 6 years, as this notion of America is a really bad place. I mean, America is awful. The hardest thing to do is break them of that in some way. I mean, they fundamentally believe now that everything in America has been horrible from the beginning, that nothing in the founding period or anything before really about the 1960s is worth even conserving. And that's by design. So when you start talking about, George Washington's a great guy. He can't be. George Washington can't be great because he lived in the time period when people owned slaves and there was women couldn't vote, minorities couldn't vote. Minorities weren't even citizens. We didn't have any of that. So there's no way these people can be great. So that's the hardest thing to break through. Well, wait a second here. I mean, we can go into Western civilization, as you teach as well, and we can say the Greeks were great at this time. You look at all the wonderful things they produced for civilization. And we don't have to say, well, you know what? Those evil Spartans, they all owned slaves. They didn't have to. I mean, they didn't allow all these other people to be citizens of Sparta. They didn't just have an open door. You just come into Sparta and just come on in. You're a Spartan. We don't have to say any of that. Or about the Athenians. We don't have to say the Romans were really restrictive in the old republic, the early republic, about citizenship until you get to Caesar. They didn't really want to expand that out either. We don't have to say any of that stuff. We can just talk about, the Romans did these great things. The Greeks did these great things. We don't have to talk about the Egyptians being slave owners. They built these wonderful pyramids. We don't have to do any of that. But in America, somehow we have to. And it's just really silly. So I think that's the hardest thing to do, is get them to realize that, if we're going to talk about history, there's going to be things about just about everybody, every group of people we don't like. But there are great things about these people that we can talk about that are worthy of our study and worthy of our interest, and that we can learn from and use to our benefit. And so I always start every class with some quotes and about these kind of things, and people that have studied history, written about history. And for that very reason, to say, historians have recognized since the beginning of the writing of the subject that you're not going to like everything you write about, but you can learn from all of this stuff. And it's important to do it. And not all these people are bad because they had views or did things that we don't like today. That doesn't make them bad people. It makes them people of their time. So that's the hardest wall to break through, is to get them to realize that if they believe that everything before the 1960s is bad, well, then you really have a hard time talking about anybody in American history being great, other than say, I don't know, the last 10 years or something even. They need best president's Obama, because he's beyond all these bad people. So that's when we got to the good stuff. It's really difficult.
Yeah, it's like a cartoon. It's like you're living in a cartoon, and
Yeah.
you have to tell the story like it's a cartoon, and there can be no nuance or, I don't know, intelligence in conversations about these topics. I want to shift gears a bit because you have had quite a bit to say about the Republican Party over the years, like the Republican Party in the 19th century, not just today. So as somebody who has thought about and written and spoken quite a bit about the Republican Party from its origins to today, describe for me how you think about the current the current makeup of the Republican Party, the current conflicts within the Republican Party. What do you make of it?
It's just a really good question. The Republican Party, in my mind, is the same Republican Party it was in 1856. It really hasn't changed. If you go back and look at the early platforms, 1856, 1860, 64, there's not a whole lot different then than now. I mean, when people say there was a flip in the 1960s that all these Democrats joined the Republican Party, I would say, I mean, a lot of them did, but the party didn't change. The party stayed what it was. So when you think about Trump and who he is, and who really is Donald Trump? Is he somehow the antithesis of the Republican Party? I would say no. I mean, Lincoln is often portrayed as kind of this populist, is he not? I mean, here's the rail splitter. He goes out, he likes to wrestle and tell popular jokes. He's a man of the people. I mean, you had Thad Stevens, the great commoner. Is that not kind of a populist message for the Republican Party? And when you look at what these people wanted, Lincoln wants tariffs. Lincoln wants a central banking system. Lincoln liked centralization of power. So did all the other Republicans. They were interested in a civil rights agenda. What's different about the Republican Party now? It says the same things. It's just that what's happened in America is that there really isn't a conservative party anymore. Everyone has, the Democrats have moved so far left, they abandoned all the conservatives in the party. Can you imagine anybody like Howard Dean, when Howard Dean stood up not that long ago, in the last 20 years, and said, I want to be the candidate that supports the guy with the Confederate flag on his pickup truck in the Democratic primary? Can you imagine a Democrat saying that today? I can't. So there is, I mean, they abandoned the white working class voter that Reagan capitalized on in the 80s. They abandoned all those people that the Democrats spent a lot of time. Joe Biden himself courted when he was running for president for a long time, or even running for Congress when he was in the Senate. He courted that voter. They don't care about that person anymore. The Republicans, so those people just kind of gone to the Republican Party because, well, where are they going to go? They got to vote for the other because the other thing's so far left. But the Republicans are still kind of a moderate left-wing party. It's what they've always been. So the conservatives don't have a party. And I think that's the real political shift in America. There's no conservative party left, and the conservatives are kind of looking around for, well, who do we vote for? Do we vote for the Republicans? Do we vote for John McCain? Do we vote for Mike Pence? Do we vote for, Mitt Romney? I mean, who are these people? Are they really that conservative? Is Donald Trump really that conservative? He gives good zingers and says funny things. We all know that. But is he really that conservative? Or is he just simply a Lincoln Republican? He would look at that as a badge of honor. I mean, he loves Hamilton. Lincoln's his guy. The Democrats say the same thing. So what's left? I mean, where do conservatives go? Do you vote third party? Do you vote for the libertarians? Well, my gosh, do you vote for the modern Libertarian Party? We could get into that debate. Do you vote for those people? Do you vote for RFK, who is so far on the left a lot of things, just like the Democrats? So who do you vote for? Do you vote for the Taxpayers Party? We know that there isn't really a whole lot of options if you're a conservative, so you just kind of go along with what the Republicans are doing. This is why I say you got to start thinking locally and acting locally, look at your local elections and try to make an impact there, because at the end of the day, that's where you're going to have the most impact anyways. And you just kind of let the center be, because it's not really going to go in your direction, no matter who is the presidential nominee or the candidate. They're going to do things that you're not going to like.
Hey, folks, I'm going to be blunt. I'm a pretty productive guy. In fact, if you're on my email list, you know I just released a productivity program to help people be super productive. And a big part of why I get so much done is that I'm impatient with fluff in all areas of my life. My approach is get to the point. And sometimes you need to say that to books, too. Just tell me what you need to tell me already. And that's exactly what the Blinkist app does for thousands of books in 27 nonfiction categories. No fluff, just getting to the heart of the matter. You can absorb the Blinkist summary in just 15 minutes of reading or listening. What a time to be alive! Among the thousands and thousands of titles at Blinkist, you'll also find libertarian classics, Rothbard, Friedman, dare I say even Woods, your very own host here. Well, right now, Blinkist has a special offer just for our audience. Go to Blinkist.com/Woods to start your 7-day free trial and get 40% off a Blinkist premium membership. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist, Blinkist.com/Woods to get 40% off and a 7-day free trial. Blinkist.com/Woods. And now for a limited time, you can even use Blinkist Connect to share your premium account. You'll get 2 premium subscriptions for the price of 1. It is so strange watching the way the American media acts. Like, they don't even make an attempt to try to look even-handed. They are just openly cheering for one side and openly demonizing the other. They don't even care that you call them hypocrites. That doesn't affect them. That critique does not affect them in any way, because they're not trying to do the thing you're accusing them of not doing. They're not trying to do that. So it doesn't matter to them that you say that they're not. Well, we don't care. We're not. We're cheerleaders for the regime, the permanent regime. That's why we're here. So, when he's running against Barack Obama, we will criticize John McCain, but at other times we'll praise him for being a maverick. And of course, being a maverick means occasionally siding with us. That makes him a maverick. Now, if you had a Democrat who occasionally sided with the America Firsters in the Republican Party, you wouldn't hear, "Oh, what a maverick." You'd hear anti-Semite, racist, whatever, Neanderthal, whatever. It is just such a mind-boggling thing to observe. And as you say, I mean, I have plenty of problems with the Republican Party, but I can also see with my eyes that the treatment of the two parties in the media is so laughable that I can't imagine. Forget about the substantive positions of the two parties. If I were just an ordinary person with no skin in the game and I observed the low IQ, dumb guy way they're cheering for one side and demonizing the other, I would think, I can't be part of that. There's no, whoever the heck it is they're cheering for, I can't cheer for them. I mean, my IQ is too high for this. Unfortunately, not enough people think that way.
Right. I mean, they could also look at it and say, well, if they're saying that guy's bad, well, like, that guy has to be bad. What you're describing is what your friend Michael Malice has said over and over again. There's no accountability. I mean, who holds the media accountable for these kind of things? It's not just hypocrisy. I mean, do we turn off the media? When you do that, well, then they try to regulate all the other alternate sites so you can't get media somewhere else. So there really isn't any accountability. These people are never held accountable for the stupid things they do because they're protected. And so what do you do? I mean, I don't have an answer to that. How do you make the media accountable? Really, how do you make the American regime accountable? If you try, well, then you have this argument about the deep state, the bureaucracy, and they go after you in all kinds of ways. It's really hard. So what do you do? And I'm not so certain that most Americans really care to be the maverick or a real maverick and say, well, they're demonizing that guy, so I really can't. I mean, I would have to vote for the guy they're demonizing. I mean, most people are front runners, right? So who's in the front? Who's going to win? Well, I want to vote for that. I actually had somebody say that to me the other day when it came to this piece. I was in Zero Hedge on secession. In 2015, I gave a talk at a Mises event in Texas on secession. I think you were there. I was there with
you. We both spoke at that.
So, and somebody cited that in a Zero Hedge piece. And there was a comment that, well, why do you want to support a losing position? Why don't you just go with the winners? I mean, that's what we should do. Just go with the winners. Okay. Well, then I guess we'll just, why even oppose anything? I mean, just go with the side that wins all the time. And I think for a lot of Americans, that's the case. They don't want to show up at the water cooler on the Wednesday after the election and they're asked, well, who'd you vote for? And if Kamala Harris wins, they don't want to say Donald Trump. Oh, I voted for Harris, because they want to look like they voted for the winner. I mean, this is what they want to do. So I think, when you think about your sports teams, why are the Yankees so popular? Because they win all the time. And I mean, there's people out there that hate them, but on the other hand, there's a lot of people, I'm going to root for the Yankees because I'm going to root for a winner. I'm going to do this because I don't want to be on the losing side. It's much harder to support a losing team over and over again than it is to support a winning one that you just feel good about yourself. My team always wins, so why would I go for the other way?
Yeah, this is why I profoundly respect, let's say, Tampa Bay Buccaneers fans, because I remember growing up in the late 70s into the 80s, they would win like 2 games a season. It would be terrible. And the Patriots were just as bad. It would be terrible.
Yeah.
And anyone who stuck it out with them, now those people deserve, the satisfaction of victory, more than anybody.
Yeah. Well, speaking of those 2 teams, they had the coolest uniforms from the creamsicle uniforms for the Bucs and the old Patriots uniforms. They were cool. I mean,
they were the old Patriots helmet. Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. It was a great helmet. I mean, they really messed it up.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. I lost interest, unfortunately, in professional sports, but occasionally I'll go to one in person. And, there is something, especially with baseball, there is something kind of the old America that still limps along in some of these old things.
I watch far too much baseball, I have to admit. So.
Oh, even now?
Oh, yes. I watch it a lot. I'm a big Orioles fan, so I watch it all. And I just love it. I've loved it since I was a kid, and I just can't give it up. I've tried. I'm not going to watch it as much. I get sucked into it all the time. I love watching.
See, I particularly love watching it in person because, of course, I grew up in the Boston area. So our local park was Fenway Park, a historic park like that. Yeah. And it was always a real pleasure to go. And I'll just tell you a quick thing. In the old days when you had a TV with VHF and UHF and you had the second dial that would have channels like up to like 60 or something, Channel 38 in Boston would run the Boston Red Sox games. And they had this thing where if you sent them in a postcard, every time the Red Sox hit a home run, they'd pull a postcard out and they would send that person 2 free tickets. I won that twice.
Wow.
They called my name out on the TV, and I went into school the next day. I was in middle school, and my teacher said, geez, I can't even get away from you on the weekends. I saw your name, Tom Woods from North Andover. So that was great. And the thing is, you would think, they'll just give you some like throwaway seats. What does it matter to them? We got, both times we had fantastic seats from this. So I still have a soft spot in my heart for that.
Well, at least you're a Red Sox fan. I mean, I don't like the Red Sox, but you're not a Yankees fan. And
I know. And I'll tell you something, and we'll get back to folks. Just hang on one more minute here. When we would go to a game against the Yankees at Fenway Park, boy, I would go in there not a Yankees fan, and I would leave really not a Yankees fan because they would make our lives miserable. Like there were way too many Yankees fans. Look, this is not your park.
Yeah.
I mean, and I once asked somebody this, by the way. Let's put the American history thing aside for 1 second. I have this, what I think is a minority opinion. But my feeling is if I am in the other team's stadium, I'm not going to obnoxiously stand up and yell and scream. I feel like that's rude. I think you're a guest and you shouldn't do that. And likewise, they shouldn't do that at your stadium. Now, I know a lot of people will say, Woods, you're crazy. I'm going to cheer anywhere I want to. Well, look, I'm not saying you should go to prison. I'm just saying I think it's bad form because I remember how rotten the Yankees fans made us feel. And I thought I wouldn't want to do that to somebody else in their own park. But I have not I don't think I've really found that many people who agree with me on that.
Yeah, of course, since I don't live in Baltimore, I can only see the Orioles when they're the visiting team now. I've been to one Orioles game in Baltimore. It's once since 1997. So I go to Atlanta a lot, or I've been down to Tampa to watch. And I'll cheer when they hit it. But I'm not obnoxious about it. I stand up and clap or,
right.
But there are people that really will be rude. They'll get in people's faces, they'll do stuff. I'm just there, I'm polite with the other fans. And your team's great and these kind of things. So, but I am going to clap if my team hits a home run or something. But I'm not going to be obnoxious about the whole situation. So, but I know there are people that are that way, and it's really bad.
Well, if the circumstances ever arose, I would be delighted to go to an Orioles game with you.
Yeah, it'd be great. Camden Yards is a beautiful place, and but like I said, I've only done it once. That was last year. I went in 2023 to Camden Yards, and I actually got watched the Angels, and Shohei Ohtani was on the Angels, and that's why I went, because I knew he was there. I was going through it. I said I've got to stop and watch the game. So that's the only time I've been to Camden Yards since '97 when I left the area. And it was different. Going back, it's been a long time. So it was fun to do it, though. Yeah.
Well, I'm taking my mastermind to a Bruins game in October. And I know some of the players because I went to a Bruins game last year. That was the only, I've been completely out of it. Now I kind of know the team a bit. But again, it's just I got a whole box for us to hang out together in and watch the game. It's going to be a great time. So I don't follow it on a regular basis, but it reminds me of my youth. It reminds me of growing up in the 80s, which was not a bad time to grow up.
No, it was a good time. I mean, I had the same thing for me. 80s were fun. Early 90s were kind of fun. And then it's the late 90s, not so much when you got into that period. It really changed. But the 80s were a great time. No
I
doubt
just
about
saw a graphic that somebody put up, and it was, I think it had like the Back to the Future characters and the car. And it was, in the 80s, they wanted to go up, to the future. Here we are, 2024. We all want to just go back to the 80s.
That's right. Let's go back 4 years. You can ride your bike, you can do things. You can't do that stuff anymore.
Yeah, it's just so much has been taken from us. But all the same, I want to recommend to folks they check out the Brion McClanahan Show. Remember Brion, Brion, as well as all his books, his McClanahan Academy. He teaches. He is really one of the hardest working people I know in our world. So you can check him out at brionmcclanahan.com. That's MCCMcClanahan.com. And Brion, I appreciate the conversation today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Tom. Appreciate it. See you.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.